Hey everybody, welcome to the Faith and Fandom podcast on the Love Thy Nerd Network. We're so glad to have you here with us today as we have author and you've done a lot of things. But we have, as we have author Timothy Huguenin with us. Tell everybody hi, Timothy.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Fun to sit down and talk with Hector, an old friend and mentor.
So, um, Timothy, like tell us as like who you are in terms of artistry, work, like what you do, etc. in that capacity.
Yeah, I am. I call myself a horror writer. I've written um, a few books, several short stories. They've been published in various online and print magazines and such like that. That's kind of my main personality, I guess you might say, in terms of like if I'm online, like being professional. Um, I mean, I do other, like you said, I have other hobbies and interests and things outside of that. I play guitar and sing at my church. I've written a very few things for like local newspapers that are just not really important. I'm not, you
Wait,
know.
the Timothy Huguenin from the West Virginia Times? What?
Oh, I am the there's actually a West Virginia writers organization that's I guess the name kind of self-explanatory there. But I edit the membership newsletter for that, so I'm a big deal in that organization.
Listen, when you have your thumb on the newsletter, you control everything.
Pretty much, yep.
So, uh, on the thing, like how long have you been writing? Like, what was your first piece you did? Like, with that?
Okay, so my first story that we know of that's recorded, and thankfully I still have a copy of this. When I was when I was in second grade, I
Oh, for
wrote.
real? The deep cut. Okay.
Yeah, by the way, I'll email you a PDF of this later on. But I when I was a kid, I wanted to write. Ever since I could really like remember wanting to do certain things, writing was a big one. And so as a kid, I wrote this story called Tom and the One-Eyed Dragon. Um, and I even illustrated it and then I gave it to dad. And the only reason I even know of this is because dad just like put it in his office somewhere. And then when we moved back in 2008, dad was cleaning out his office and he found this thing. So I scanned all of it and put it in a PDF. So I have it for it. It's pretty funny to look back on that. Um, but I kind of wrote off and on as kind of a hobby and interest in high school, a little bit in like middle school, and then when I first declared a major in college, it was creative writing, but then I changed it. Um, but I took a couple writing classes in college, but mostly I've learned by reading other books, reading books about writing, and talking to other writers. So as terms of like trying to be more serious, getting more serious about it after college, I kind of realized, oh, I always said I was gonna write a novel, but I had too much homework. I guess I don't have homework now, so I guess I'll try that. And so I kind of worked on my first novel from 2012 up until about probably 2015, I think. I think I got a final draft, but it wasn't the final draft of my first novel. Um, I ended up about a year later kind of reworking it again and then self-publishing my first novel. And then the year following that I wrote the my second one. Um,
So what is your first one? The one that you
my
put
first one I have right here is called When the Watcher Shakes. I don't know how that's coming through there.
has
Um,
Oppenheimer vibes.
oh, cool. That's a cool thing to
Or I
hear.
guess I
More
guess
relevant.
Oppenheimer has When the Watcher Shakes vibes.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. So this predates Oppenheimer the movie, but not Oppenheimer the person, right?
Fair point.
This is a story about a kind of creepy cult in the woods kind of thing. This one is probably has a lot of most of my influence in terms of being more overtly having like themes of faith and Christianity. Um, and it has a lot to do with um, like kind of the more legalistic kinds of expressions of Christianity that I've seen and experienced and been a part of in a lot of ways. So that was a very people ask me. It's kind of funny because uh, people ask me kind of like, well, do these people in these book are they like based off of real people? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty much everybody in there is based off of me, even the bad guy, you know. So
Well, that's good self reflection.
yeah. But yeah, that's my first one. It's pretty cool. Actually, was kind of new to the horror genre. Um, and as I was writing it, I was actually kind of originally had a very I was really focused on kind of a dystopian kind of direction with it. 1984 is a really um, influential kind of book, one of my favorite books. And so I had a lot of that in mind while I was writing this. And then as I was writing it, I was also kind of getting more into reading books by Stephen King and people like that. And I think it kind of came out without me even realizing it. And I was getting some author like blurbs when I was getting ready to publish it. And the one of the authors said, "How are you marketing this book?" I mean, I'm kind of assuming it's like a small town horror thing, but it's going to what genre you're kind of presenting this as is kind of going to affect how I blurb this book. And I was like, yeah, I guess it is horror. I just never really like sat down and thought about it. But by the time I had kind of finished with the different versions of it, it turned into more of a horror novel.
So for you, just to say, check this, like, what defines horror for you?
That's a big question. So, um, the I have a lot of thoughts in my head because I'm like Facebook friends with so many horror writers that we all kind of talk and then forget sometimes what a lot of people think horror is or what people because a lot of people would be like just ew I don't like that right because they just think of for in the 80s those slashers were a big deal
Yeah.
and there are people that love those and that's horror, yeah. But then there's people that like saw those and thought like, oh, that's horror and I don't want that. That's not my thing, right? Um, and then it means so many, for some people it just means gore and everything. But for me, and most of really my friends in the genre here, we tend to want to make horror a big umbrella term. And there's a lot of different subgenres there, and it can include a lot more things than you think. But I'm trying to think of like, there's different obvious horror tropes. You've got like ghost stories, haunted houses, uh, cults, slashers, monsters, vampires. So, usually if it has one of those things in it, it's kind of easy to say, oh, yeah, this has got horror stuff in it. It's probably horror. But really, I think um, horror is meant to um, explore like maybe the darker aspects of life, or it can explore, I mean, I think at the very basic level, fear is a defining characteristic, whether it's meant to make you afraid or to explore fear in a more abstract way. That's a important part of the human experience, and what horror can do for us, actually, I think, is help us to explore those things, those fears that we have, societal or individual fears, or explore the darkness and and really horrible parts of our human experience in a way that's still safe for us, right? So we can come to these concepts and process them without an actual like serial killer chasing us down, right? Um, so yeah, that's the probably the most unless I really sat and thought about it even more. Um, like I said, it's a big thing. It's hard for me to nail down to one thing, but um, I don't know if you can cut this up better and put it up.
No, dude, this is good. This is good.
Okay.
That's like I'm just listening. I'm not like not even not even
I'm
concerned.
hoping you cut me off at some point.
No, no, it's like I'm gonna let you go, bro.
Okay.
It's as they say in the wrestling industry, he's cooking.
Yeah. Okay.
Because my 10-year-old loves wrestling now, so I'm re-immersed in that world I left when I was 18. Um,
My pastor's son is really into Nacho Libre, and they got him a what are those masks called?
Luchador.
Yeah, a luchador mask for like his birthday or something, and he's like crazy about it.
So I need you to be able to pass this on to your pastor's son. If you didn't already see this, Nacho Libre is a real person,
Really?
and he's alive, and he's still doing ministry. Um, and but his wrestling name is Frey Tormenta.
Okay. Free
Um,
Pimenta.
I'll send you the thing on it, but he's a real person, and he literally kept a Mexican orphanage open for over 20 years by wrestling.
Wow.
And but he's like an ordained priest, um, and like he's still doing ministry today.
Wow.
Um, like, and I didn't know he existed until there's a wrestler named Charlotte Flair. Like it's Ric Flair's daughter. She got married last year, and he officiated the wedding. And it's a big thing now that people want to pay Nacho Libre to officiate their wedding.
Wow.
Um, so it's just like, but learning that he's a real dude and that he actually kept an orphanage afloat by wrestling, I was like, that's so gangster.
How is that not part of their whole promotion strategy?
Like if you because I think if you did based on a true story, you'd have to treat it more seriously.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's in the opening credits or whatever.
Oh, okay. I have to.
But
It's been a while. I need to
yeah,
watch that again.
if I watch it, I'm barely watching it. I just need to put it on for ambiance because I can say the whole movie anyway. But yeah, he's a real Frey Tormenta. He's a real wrestler. Like he wears the priest robes with the luchador mask.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, I'll send you the thing of it. So you can make that kid's day. Let him know.
Yeah.
Um, but so that's your first one. What was the response overall to your first book coming and you self-published it? How was that response in that process?
Um. Oh man. So it was definitely a big learning process, and I had a lot of support from like the local libraries and went to places. You know, I'm not a good like marketing and promotion and stuff. I don't really I don't consider myself very good at that now, but I certainly wasn't good at it when I started, right? And when you're self-publishing, you're just on your own.
Right.
And so I was still learning about going to, book fairs and trying to figure out how to get, you know, Amazon promotions to work and all that crazy stuff. Uh, so it was kind of like slow going for that one in terms of getting it out there, getting people to know about it. But I got a lot of really good response from people that read it, reviewers and stuff. And in fact, I actually did a second edition. You go over it so many times, but it's your first book, right? So um, several years later, I ended up going through and kind of cleaning it up a little bit, just in terms of my you know, make it the style a little more flowing, a little better. And got a really this cover, the Oppenheimer cover here is actually the second edition
I was
cover.
about to
The
say
first,
that was not your original cover, but yeah.
no, the original cover was a little more basic, not quite as nice as that. I hadn't found. I got a really good relationship with the cover artist when I got my second novel, and had him go back and redo that one. But um, it was it was a definitely a learning experience. Definitely positive. I mean, um, the it's just the craziest thing to get a box of books in your house that has your name on it, right? So like that first, I mean, it's still an awesome thing to see my name on something that I wrote that's like, looks like something people will read. But that first time is the kind of the craziest.
Yeah. Um, and you have like I know now from talking to you recently that you have a publicist, right? Or a
An agent.
an agent.
Yeah.
How is that like how has that been beneficial for you? Like what's that been like?
Yeah, the agent is great. For one thing, it really kind of validates.
And it's a literary agent, correct?
Yeah,
That's the
literary agent. Yeah.
okay.
Validates a lot of like insecurities I have about myself because it's somebody else that like believes in my writing as something that can be commercially successful and stuff. So she we are working on pitching. So I have let me think. I lost count. I have like three other manuscripts that are not published that are for like adult age ranges, and then a couple middle school books that haven't been published. And so I actually my agent was interested in me when I queried her for one of my middle school books, but she also likes my adult ones, and so she has been. We've been working on pitching those to bigger publishers, and we've also there's some other things I can't really talk about that are because of my agent that are definitely good things. Um, so it's been learning experience. It's a new relationship that you have to kind of navigate. Um, and but working with her has been really good, and it's been really given me a lot more confidence too in what I can do, and I think it's going to be really good going forward.
Okay. Sounds like the hustle's real with
Yeah.
that. Um, so just in terms of, people writing novels and things like that, you recommend a literary agent over not.
Yeah. Well, so some people are do really well self-publishing, and they hustle, and they can get things out there, and it seems like they're not even phased by it. But I just know after my second novel, I was kind of like, man, I need somebody kind of in my corner here, and I and I would love to get a publishing deal so that I don't have to deal with all the publishing stuff because I'm not really like it's not fun. It's fun, but it's not what I really want to be devoting most of my time to. So yeah, that is definitely worth trying for it. And it took me a while. I told you I have three, I guess a total now of five unpublished manuscripts because I kind of committed to not self-publishing going forward, right? And so I'm like, I got to get an agent. So every time I'd like try to get an agent for this book, and then I didn't, I go a year or two and didn't. Oh, okay, I'm going to write the next book and get an agent for this one, and so just kept trying and eventually got there. But it's really kind of takes a different kind of commitment. There's the commitment of going all on your own and putting a lot of energy to that, but then there's also kind of the risk involved in just being like, I want to have all these books ready so that when I do get an agent that wants to work with me, we will have kind of an archive of things to kind of go through and work with. So, uh,
That seems like torture to me. Like not the agent part, the waiting part.
oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
because for me personally, I can't stand for stuff not to be done, like
yeah,
to be out there. Like if I write something, I want it out. Like
Yeah,
because I feel like there's a cathartic process to that, and knowing that it's just waiting to be birthed, like in that sense, ugh.
yeah.
I
No,
want to
that's
throw up in my mouth.
definitely that's definitely part of it. I will say that like that's the coolest thing about how about self-publishing is it can all go so fast, really. Even if you're doing it like carefully and like putting a lot of effort in it, compared to like the book publishing world as a whole, it's still super fast. And that's such a cool thing. And um, what kind of I think what keeps me sane is the short stories because short story publications um are move much more quickly. So I mean uh, it's not, lightning speed even the way I'm doing it, but I can publish a few short stories every year. I have kind of a lot of now I don't have a lot of unpublished ones, but at a certain time in my life, I had a lot of short stories written that hadn't been published, and then it takes a while too to get those accepted in different places. If you're trying to get them published by like a magazine or something like that. But if you have so many at a time, you can just like keep sending them out and sending them out. And so it kind of got to a point where I would get a couple published every year while I'm working on these bigger things. And it kind of, I guess, um, gave me that little bit of that little um, I don't know if dopamine is the right word, but you know,
Serotonin, dopamine, whatever it is. Yeah.
yeah, it's that kind of that little mini success is like, okay, I'm still putting stuff out there. People are reading my stuff, um, even though I've been like in a cave working on this long thing forever. That maybe years before anybody sees.
Yeah. Well, that's like one of the things that I started doing maybe 2 years ago was because of that. And like also, I want to say 2021 was the first year I didn't publish a book since 2013. And like with it, I was definitely running out of steam and time. And so I started rather than waiting for a whole book to be done, whenever I would write a chapter, I would put it up on a website like a blog,
Yeah.
and then I would read that chapter as a podcast.
Oh, cool.
And in doing that, that also dramatically helped the editing process because when
Yeah.
I actually say it out loud, I'm like, oh, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Let me go back and fix it. So literally half the time, if you ever listen to the audio versions, I'm stopping, going back, editing. All right, back to the sentence, and
Yeah.
that's definitely helped with the weight of even releasing it. But like even now, see, literally that's my horror. What you described as my horror story is just waiting. Like,
Yeah.
and I know it's its own thing because I spent the past year and a half, almost 2 years, working on a comic book with a guy that I work with artistically. And I wrote a script because a guy who works in the comic book industry, uh, like, there's like Marvel, DC on down the line. They
Yeah.
probably work for like the eighth to 10th popular publisher. So they're like
Okay.
down the ladder, but they're still good. We were doing a show together and he's like, hey, you should write some, Jesus-y stuff and let us publish it for a comic. So I was like, bet. So I wrote a script, sent it to an artist, and waiting a year and a half for the artist to finish the book killed me.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like literally, we're friends, and so I'd be watching his Instagram. Yeah, that's a great Spider-Man sketch you did there.
Yes.
How about do mine? Oh, or we'd be at a con and I'd be watching him draw stuff for other people. I'm like, do my work. Um, but then like I finally got the book done and submitted it to that publisher, or that publishing company. And like I think we're on 5 weeks now of being considered.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just like, it's like it didn't get told no the first day, but come on.
Yeah.
Tell like and so like I've published like a version of it, we'll go forward with it's the first edition because like the book was in black and white. Um, Mainly because I couldn't pay for color at this
Hmm.
stage in the game. Like I couldn't pay the artist to actually do 30 color pages
Yeah.
on my budget. And so the publisher said that if they do pick it up, it's going to have to be colored.
Hmm.
But at that point, they can pay for that. So, but just waiting literally like less than 2 years has felt torture. So,
Yeah.
like, I can't imagine you just sitting around with like whole worlds in
Yeah.
type, just waiting to exist.
Yeah. Sometimes I think about like some things I wrote, and you know, every once in a while you think about something you wrote, and you feel like, oh, that was actually pretty good. You know, um, I mean, usually it's, oh man, I wish I'd done it differently. But every once in a while, you'll think like, oh, that was a cool scene that I did, and then I'll realize nobody's seen it. Nobody knows, right? Except for my wife. My wife reads all my stuff and she loves it. So
Well,
that's
that's good.
yeah.
See
She's
that?
actually yeah, is a really good first reader because she actually likes what I write, but she's also not like enamored with it. So she'll tell me when she doesn't think something's working.
Good enough to appreciate it, not enough to idolize it.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you this, and this might be way too hard for you to actually answer. Um, what's the best sentence you've written?
I don't know if I can think of one best sentence, but there the my third novel, which is not published, um, I had the idea for it, and I went upstairs and wrote a prologue. Like kind of this idea kind of came to my head, and this character, and it was kind of not fully formed, but like I had a real clear image, and I wrote this prologue. It's probably it's not really long, just kind of introduces this book, and then um, eventually I wrote the whole book, then went over, revised it, and revised it. But that prologue is almost word for word what I wrote that first day, and I keep going back to it, and I would keep going back to things and try to see what needs to be changed here, and I might have tweaked like some punctuation or maybe a couple words, but like it's remarkably the same that I wrote it that first time. I've really not found anything that needs to change on it. And I actually, so funny story about the publishing world. So I did, I didn't get an agent for that book, but I'm like, I'm going to try the small presses because there's a number of kind of small sized horror publishers um, that that exist, and the number constantly fluctuates because they're always going out of business, or the one guy that runs it, his uncle has cancer or something. Like crazy stuff happens.
Life. Yeah.
Um, so I'm like, I'll do that because that way at least I'll have a little publisher. They may not be able to do, you know, as much as a big publisher from New York or something, but at least they'll have already an audience. Kind of, it'll give me a little more credibility. They can help promote it and stuff. So I got offers from two small horror presses, and one of them had actually had really awesome things to say about that prologue in particular. He said this is one of the best introductions, like or prologues to a novel I've read in a long time. So that kind of made me feel good and everything. But I didn't end up going with him. And then the other one, I did accept the offer. Both of those presses went under before my book was published. So neither one would have been actually the first one that the one that I rejected actually kind of dropped off the map first, and I was kind of like, oh, I made the right choice. It would have been in bad hands, but then the other one did the same thing, and uh, so that third book almost did get released out there. My dad still asks me about like when that third book coming out. was like, I'm saving it, Dad. I'm saving it for the big time. But so that pro to answer your question, I'm not sure this is necessarily true, but off the top of my head, that's one of the things that I feel like I can go back to and still read it and be really proud of that. And in fact, I think it's on my website somewhere. I think when I was writing the book, I was like, I'm working on this book. Here's how it starts, and and that just made a bunch of people. Well, it didn't make anybody mad because hardly anybody's reading it. But if you were reading it and expecting to read more, you.
Okay. So you mentioned your dad, and if I say anything like inappropriate or wrong, yell at me. Um, how like you come from like as you previously mentioned, you come from a very not necessarily legalistic, but a very conservative Christian background.
Yeah,
Um,
my dad's very conservative.
your family always had very strong like convictions about like right, wrong, and appropriate. Like, so I think of your mom almost daily. Um, because Switchfoot's one of my favorite bands. Like to this day, I still think they've consistently made some of the best heart encouraging music and everything. But I just remember like at some point, like let's say 2008, your mom telling me like, she couldn't agree with Switchfoot because their music was used in a Victoria's Secret commercial. And I think
Okay.
of and like that she was anti Switchfoot because of that. And I was like, I'm not knocking her for that. I was just like, but I literally have that thought crosses my mind every day. Like a Switchfoot song comes on my shuffle, and I'm like,
How
leave.
does she even know that? I didn't know that.
But I was like, that thought crosses my mind every day. Like today,
Yeah.
like there's a 21 Pilots cover of a song by Switchfoot from their 20th anniversary of The Beautiful Letdown. And I literally in my car today was like, Leah doesn't like this album.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
like coming from a very, you know, family that was conservative in those ways that had like strong conviction on those things, how was their response to you writing horror?
Really, they really liked my books, and I guess I might have been a little nervous about it. Um, but honestly, my family has always been almost everybody in my immediate family are really into reading fiction, and in terms of horror as a genre, I don't know if in the Christian world we call them thrillers.
Frank
you
Peretti doesn't write horror. It's a thriller.
Exactly, right.
It's a
So
thriller.
they were big fans of Frank Peretti and pretty not big fans, but they also read Ted Dekker. I was raised on that stuff. I didn't start reading anything outside of, I didn't read Stephen King or Dean Koontz or any of those guys until much later as an adult. But our family read Ted Dekker and Frank Peretti and stuff. So in terms of kind of like books that had creepy undertones and overtones, like that wasn't taboo. Um, and so they were really supportive of it. I don't know, maybe if yeah, um, they haven't told me they've never really expressed positive things to me.
Well, that's really awesome. Um, so on a broader scale of that nature, like, and you were kind of hinting at it, how do you feel like horror as a genre fits in with Christianity in general?
Yeah, I love that question. Because because like I've run into a lot of people that find it um they would take issue with it, right? Like my mom takes issue with Switchfoot. People would take issue with horror. And I actually had somebody in my church ask me one time, um, how can you write horror? And I thought, uh, you, again, going back to like kind of forgetting for a while the people that aren't familiar with all the things that I've thought through and everything. It didn't click with me for a second. I just said, I guess the same way someone writes science fiction or romance. But If I was really going to be a little more thoughtful with the response there, it would be that, like I said before, fear is just as much a part of what we experience as humans as love or wonder or all those things, and it's something that I think we can explore in fiction, and as Christians, we shouldn't be afraid to do that. And for them, and again, I'm not. We talked about Ted Dekker and Frank Peretti, and their books are very directly focused toward kind of that Christian reader market, and that expects like a neat uh, lesson about the Bible kind of tied up in the
A theological,
right.
platitude put up with a
That's not
bow
what
on
it
it.
really set out to do. Like I did say in my first book, it was kind of more had a lot more influence in that, but I don't try to limit myself to that. I think stories that don't teach lessons are just as important and useful. So I don't want to give the idea that I'm trying to make a statement on theology with every story that I write. Uh, but having said that, there's a lot of scary stuff in the Bible. Revelation, if we really thought about it, could give us nightmares. Um, and you could very much instead of what was it? Lahaye and Jenkins turned it into kind of like a almost like a spy suspense thriller series, but it could have been a horror series easily.
Yeah,
Uh, and um, there's scary things in the world, and I don't. But as much there's a lot of philosophical kind of answers that you can give to this stuff, but here's the honest truth about me and horror. I like it and I don't know why. I like it just because, I it's like the my favorite style of music. I don't really know why I like it. It just like hits me the right way, you know? So there's something about it that I enjoy and I find intriguing, and I don't necessarily have any issue if you don't like it. I'm not going to try to convince you. Um, but I don't stress out about um, really defending it much anymore. I guess I just
that's fair because I mean,
yeah,
and that's one of the things. Usually, the people that have the biggest problems only want to make sure you know how they feel. They're not
yeah,
really trying to have a conversation about it.
yeah,
Um, it's just one of those things. It's just like growing up as a teenager on in the church. It's just like you don't do horror. It's the wrong thing. It's the devil.
yeah.
I've got, people today that, still won't watch anything scary or anything that has a demon in it just because, you know, you're opening a door for, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, but here's the thing. Horror, and it can be done a lot of different ways, but most of the horror that are mainstream kind of, you've got like the haunting and possession stories and stuff. Those are more Christian than most of the other movies we watch, right? If you've got a guy that's trying to exorcise a demon from a girl, that's God is the good guy and Satan's the bad guy, right? they they might have said a lot of bad words during that exorcism on the part of the demon, but that was the demon. So you that's another thing. A lot of the horror that's even mainstream popular reinforces a lot of Christian theology. Now, I don't want to get into that because most of our ideas of what like in demonology and angelology and stuff really aren't biblical anyway.
biblical anyway.
But in terms of like values, a lot of horror movies out there are probably more Christian values than um, you know, Tangled or Frozen or whatever stuff.
But I love
Not that those
Tangled.
are bad either.
I was
I
about to
love
say I
Tangled.
love Tangled.
Now, Tangled, Frozen's overrated, but Tangled's
Tangled is
cool.
gold, bro. Um, Maybe I just love Zachary Levi, but still, yeah, Tangled is gold. Um, so with creating horror worlds, you've got stuff waiting to come out. You've got stuff that you're still writing. Um, do you have an idea of what you would want your big like magnus opus to be of like defining story of saying like this is the one? Is there a story like that waiting?
There was at one point I really, really wanted to write a book on the West Virginia Mine Wars, which is this crazy time in history, is this labor conflict that kind of started in Pennsylvania in the late 1800s, and then the conflict kind of started hitting West Virginia in the early 1900s or the mid or the 1920s. Um, and I won't get into it now. I was just saying about unionization and the mine operators and uh, hired so-called detectives that were really just kind of
Like
uh,
Pinkertons and stuff?
yeah. Pinkertons were Pennsylvania and West Virginia it was the Baldwin Felts. But it's such a crazy time in history during what everybody else considers everywhere else we think of the Roaring Twenties, Jazz Age, and just opulence and crazy, stuff going on.
Gatsby and Downton
Yeah,
Abbey and all that.
that
Yeah.
right. In West Virginia, man, it was a different world, and workers were getting abused, murdered, and things just because they wanted a safer living environment and better wages. And and I come from West Virginia, so I kind of learned about this because of my interest in my own state's history. But I find most people, I mean, even myself, I wasn't really familiar with until an adult. So um, it's just there's a lot of stories there that I feel like need to be told, but I just don't know that I'm not the idea of anything that's like historical fiction really intimidates me. So that's why I've never even tried yet because just the amount of research um, and the weight of that kind of like there are true things that happen and I want to be faithful to that. That what I love about one of the things I love about horror fiction is that I can make up a whole lot of stuff and it doesn't matter. Historical fiction, you gotta kind of you got a little bit. I mean, there's license, but uh, people are gonna be like, well, this isn't the way this was, and this wasn't the way this was, and I really don't want my inadequacy in presenting like the historical facts as I need to present them. I don't want that to like stand in the way of a good story, so I'm really intimidated by that prospect. And I'm not sure now even that I would. Uh, like I said, that was something I really wanted to do for a while. I'm not sure now, maybe having thought about it more and realizing the scope of that, if I would even be as interested now in doing it. But I will say one of my favorite books of all time is not a horror book. It's by Denise Giardina. It's called Storming Heaven, and it's set during the Mine Wars. Actually, covers kind of the history of this fictional family in West Virginia before the mining companies and logging companies did come and take the land, and then as those companies took over, how it changed the family's relationships and how it changed the economy there and stuff. It's a really interesting book, and Denise is such an amazing writer. That's one of the things I know I can never be as good as her. So why would I even try to write that book that she wrote already?
Yeah.
So
So I've got a friend named Chris North, um, who is a horror enthusiast, and he has written a series of essays that's effectively faith and fandom for horror.
oh, cool.
So it's
I
basically like
what's his name again?
Chris North.
Chris North. Okay.
And let me see if I can find his book thingy real quick. Or his yeah. He had to redo his Facebook page recently. Um yeah, horror is kind of his jam. Um
Cool.
and I'll see if I can send you links to his stuff. Um but like he effectively does devotionals based in horror. Like um being someone raised in ministry, and you and I did ministry together for like a hot minute. And have you thought of blending those worlds on your end before?
Um,
Or are those just you like those to stay separate on the tray?
yeah, I mean, like I said, I feel like if I were to, I don't know. I guess I just haven't considered considering doing something like that. Um, I guess I wouldn't necessarily not consider it either. uh, but at this point, I'm mostly just focused on. I've tried to do the blogging thing. I'm so bad at it. I don't like to blog very much, and I feel like that would be something. Not like blogging, but like basically, I guess what I'm trying to say is, when I want to write, I want to write pretty much just fiction.
Yeah.
You know? And so I guess that might be something I'd be interested down the road. But right now, I feel like most of my writing, like all my writing energies, most as much as possible, I just put into like stories.
Okay. I was just curious because that's that seemed like a foreign concept to many people, and
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was something that had registered on your bubble before.
I will say I did. I have heard of one other writer doing something like that. I think. Excuse me. I never know if I'm saying his name right. Mike Duran. He wrote a book. I was kind of in touch with him for a while, and we kind of have not really uh, been in touch with each other in a while. But I know he wrote a book that was about like Christian horror and his experience as a Christian and a horror writer, and kind of his. If you had to make a defense for it, that's what he was doing. And I have it on my Kindle, and I hope he doesn't watch this because I haven't read it yet.
I've got a lot of books that I bought that still haven't made it into my
Right.
brain yet, so I feel you. So last question, probably maybe. What's the scariest thing you've read? What's the scariest thing you've watched as a horror person? Like,
Yeah.
where's that fall in your line?
All right. I will start with this. Movies freak me out way more than books. I don't know why. Um, it's not that the books that I've read weren't as good. Sometimes it's even like the not as good movies that scare me the most. There's just something maybe about the image that is more clear in my mind. I don't know. Um, I'll tell you. This has to do a little bit with the context of what was happening too. But one of the times I was most freaked out with a movie, I was where my wife was gone for something. I don't remember. She might have been like it might have been summer and she was working a camp job and I was in town and by myself for a while. I was watching The Conjuring. I'd never seen it before. And The Conjuring is a good movie. I mean, that's one of my favorites, I think. But it wasn't that while I was watching it, I was like, I can't watch this anymore. But as soon as those credits, like the last image of the movie and the credits came on, somebody started banging on my front door. And I flipped out. It turned out it was my neighbor. She was like in some kind of rush she was having some sort of crisis and she needed me to help her, like, I don't even remember, take the back bench out of her minivan or something. But she was stressed out on her own, so for whatever reason, she was like banging on my door like crazy. And I mean, just as soon as the movie ended, those credits rolled. It it was just bang, 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 bang. So that's definitely a memorable moment where I was like definitely creeped out by a horror movie. And then I'll give you a bonus one. I was watching The Witch, and I don't remember. I'm ashamed to say I don't remember the writer director, but it was one of Anya Taylor-Joy's earlier films that I think she got more notoriety for.
Okay.
Um, Kind of a slow burn thing, very slow movie, beautifully shot, and like and they don't rely on jump scares really. And I was watching it thinking like this is a really like well-made movie and interesting story, but I remember thinking 'cause I'm like I'm not really scared. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I need to pee and I can't get out of bed. So that one kind of snuck up on me. So those two are probably memorably gave me different kinds of scares. In terms of books, I think um, A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. That one was I remember that one have some creepy scenes in it. I really like that's one of the books I need to go back and read it again, but it's one of the ones that I think of pretty often. And then um, I really got into the short fiction of Thomas Ligotti. Um, I know I'm giving you deep cuts here, but
I asked you questions for.
Thomas Ligotti writes this kind of uh, he only, as far as I know, I don't think he has any full novels. He might have one, and if it is even a novel, it's a pretty short one. But almost all of his fiction is short stories. So he has a few short story collections you can get, and they're very unique. And really, reading him really changed a lot of the ways I looked at how I even approach writing my own stories. His the horror in his fiction is more not even just psychological, but almost like philosophical, um, like existential horror. A lot of people have called it, and I can't read that stuff. Really gets under my skin in different ways. So there's sometimes I'll be reading it and I'll get that same kind of like creeped out feeling that you get when you're reading or watching a good scary movie or book. Um, but I also have to kind of take his stories in a few at a time and take breaks because uh, it does something weird to my head, like um, in terms of just like not that I'm like thinking bad stuff, but it just like I said, it's very existential and it'll creep you out probably in a way you haven't been before.
The horror persists, and so do I.
Yeah.
All right, man. So, uh, give us your rundown of what is available for of yours that people can read, where they can
Okay.
find it, and what they should look for.
Yeah. So we talked about my first book, When the Watcher Shakes. That's the Creepy Cult in the Woods book. Um, my second novel, Little One, is probably my most, in terms of at least physical, like when I go to book fairs and stuff, for whatever reason, this one outsells my first one. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's the cover or if I'm just better at pitching it. But this is a ghost story set in Canaan Valley, West Virginia, where I grew up. Um, I have a novella here, Unknowing, I Sink. And that one is weird. So we didn't even get to talk about weird fiction. Man, that's another whole other thing. But that's kind of my like weird horror stuff. And my short stories, there's a lot that you can read for free online. If you go to my website, um, tghuguenin.com, which I know nobody's going to know how to spell. So I also have a redirect URL, Mountain
The
Horror.
link will be in whatever
Yeah,
this is
we can
posted
put the
to.
link in the show notes and then also mountainhorror.com will redirect to my website. And if you go on a tab that says short fiction or short stories or something like that, there's a list of all my published short stories and where you can find them. And a lot of those links actually go to a website where you can read it for free, although some of them will go to like if it's an anthology, it'll go to the Amazon or seller's page or something. And then there's some podcast episodes where my stories are narrated, which are also on that list. And if you sign up for my mailing list, you will get a free kind of mini ebook emailed to you that you can read on your Kindle or phone or whatever it is that you have to read things on. My sisters, so this is a big, what's the word? Um, my sisters think that's my scariest thing I've ever written. That free ebook you'll get, Antique Bed.
Antique
Um,
bed. Okay.
yeah. I I can see maybe why they'd say that. It's not necessarily what I think is my scariest thing, but I could see why they'd say that. And yeah, I we all know the drill. You're getting that free ebook because you're signing up from a mailing list, but you're not going to get a million emails. Like I said, I hate blogging. So I basically only send out email updates, other than the pre-programmed ones that you'll get when you first sign up. The ones that I actually send out regularly are just kind of when, like, I have a new publication out, new short stories somewhere, or there's a sale, or you once in a blue moon, I might try to like kind of um, help a friend of mine who's got a new book release. I might recommend it or something, but you'll probably forget that you signed up after a while because you won't hear from me. I'm just being honest. I know that's not how you're supposed to do it.
Just sign up. You won't know I'm there. Just...
Yeah, you'll forget about me, then one day I'll come out with a new book and you'll see my name and not know, and you'll just like hit delete immediately or something. Hopefully not.
Well, dude, thank you for taking time to share with me and to share with all the folks that will listen, watch, slash multitask their way through.
Yeah, I
Uh,
hope it's not too difficult to listen to me. I'm a writer, not a talker for a reason. I don't run a podcast because I know how bad it would be. Hopefully you got something interesting out of that.
I think you did great, man. Thank you for joining with us. Remember, you can catch new episodes of this first on lovethynerd.com/faith and fandom. There's also lots of other great podcasts associated with the channel. Uh, Free Play Podcast is there. Pullist Podcast is on there as well, and just lots of other cool ones on there. And thanks for taking time to listen with us. And you remember to check out Timothy's links and books and such in the show notes. And I hope you guys have a great day.